think I was in the middle of a bloom, or a death. I was engulfed in a sea of hard shadows, and it reeked of peppermint oil and copper and bleach. A gaseous texture that's not unlike your hands. Still, I was driving across oceans in an old silver Subaru, and I was soaked with sea salt and fish foam. I never did get there. It's not that my roads were gushing, or that my irises burst. In fact, I think I felt like sunflowers there with you. I was like pollen and yellow and petals, but floating in the wind, an astronaut in space. But you were never really there with me. A vacancy, the depth of a slow, meandering blink. Yes, that's what it was. Galaxies with little bits of galaxies in their sun petals, and I held them for you. I just held them.
I could never understand how we saw the sun beneath my skin, behind my mascara and eyeliner and drawn-on freckles. When he told me he wrote poetry about me, I felt a yellow flicker in my chest, but I pushed it down as far as I could. Maybe it came out when I laughed. I think he was the only one that saw it, so he reached his hand into my ribcage and rummaged for a meadow. Long stretches of pollen and petals, striped bees extracting sweet sugar, big sunflower in the baby blue sky swatting tart rays around the clouds, the stems, our legs. It felt good, but I think I always knew he'd never find what he was looking for.
There were icicles last February when we went to that concert. He bought us dinner from Village Inn, but I felt like I didn't deserve it, so I only ordered coffee and french fries. The former far too bitter, and the latter undersalted. You ordered an omelet splattered with mozzarella and cheddar, stuffed with red and green bell peppers, and sprinkled with thin bits of a pinkish ham.
He slowly peeled the top off of one of those little creamers that comes with a pot of coffee. After pouring 2 into his cup, he opened a third and drank it like a shot of liquor. As I poured salt over my plate, he added 3 packets of raw sugar to his coffee. It all dissolved into one pool of tan that he tipped to his lips. Such pale lips.
I hated pork and peppers, and that's what your breath smelled like for the rest of the night. You drove too fast down Colfax, and the black acid and oil from dinner splashed around the bottom of my esophagus. When we entered, we let the music pour into us. Close enough for breath to intertwine. Peppers and coffee. It clearly didn't match, but I continued to hold you close.
He put his arm around my shoulders as I screamed the lyrics. In the smoke and lights, I felt his hand resting on my waist. The shape of his breath on my neck left my lips tingling. I leaned in and out of him. I was scared of getting too close to his sides. We looked at each other, but He never kissed me, and I was fine. Neon and warm.
I didn't have the courage to press my lips to yours, and I regretted it when we stepped out into the rain. I didn't want the coins or bills in my pocket to rust or rip. A kiss would have been a good umbrella.
I didn't need it. I thought I wanted it, but I didn't need it. The whole ride home, we listened to songs about heartbreak. I knew he was like those songs. Red and silent and aching.
When we drove around that lake near your neighborhood, I could smell the geese feathers and hisses skipping across the surface. The sun set slowly over the huge man-made mirror, purple and orange nodding up and reflecting in the huge man-made mirror. I could see your reflection too, with frizzy blonde hair, tiny hands, beauty marks dotting your cheek and upper lip. I grabbed your hand as I drove, and your palm sweat and my hands became soaked in your atoms.
I let him slide his fingers into my palm, but they didn't fit like I thought they would. His were too small, and I needed something larger, something that could hold my explosions and shrapnel. I looked at him driving, and I felt like a stranger in that car. I decided to let go, because it's easier that way.
I adored the drip into my pores, but you drew your hand back to your lithe body. I should have strode into that little lake, let the algae dress my skin and pull me deeper until I was gone. Maybe you would have dove in after me, putting your mouth on mine and looking into me. Saliva and sunset water filling each other.
He parked and laid his head in my lap, looking up at me with eyes that were shovels. He dug into me, and I couldn't take it any longer.
We didn't kiss that night. Your dad caught us before we could, and I ached for your cherry Carmex and drawn-on freckles. As you walked back into your house, melting into the white string lights hanging in your room.
I always felt little explosions in me, and I think my ribs must have been fractured. I pretended like it didn't hurt, and I let my skin keep me whole. It was a war inside of me, and I just wanted the heat and debris to leave. I wanted to be his meadow, but I was ravaged. And how could I ever give it to him? I hated the cold, so I let him in to keep me warm. When the weather was gray, I didn't want to lose the yellow he gave me. I let the charcoal dye from my hair fade back to blonde. I wore a cropped yellow sweater. I painted my nails with the sun. I even let him go with me to a tattoo parlor. Let him sit next to me as an artist jabbed a needle into my arm with golden ink. He smiled when he saw the sunflower bursting off of my skin.
I wonder how wet it is up there in the January stratosphere. Christmas lights were still strung up, like multicolored sequins on slinky slip dresses.
I only ever let him graze the waistbands of my jeans. I never wore dresses.
What would it be like? Living in those globes, brimming with sparkly pools, swimming through with tiny white flakes falling around us? People think that snow globes are only filled with water, but most of them are filled with a deadly antifreeze solution to ensure they remain unfrozen during delivery.
I have a collection of snow globes I get out for Christmas. I don't have any with fields of sun petals. It would be strange to have snow on sunflowers.
I drank you and I didn't freeze, but the globe we were in was filled with magma, so it didn't matter much anyway.
I love sunflowers because of you. Because that's what you made me out to be. I always felt warm when you wrote sunflowers onto your pages. I never asked you to eat my petals. I had to keep my pollen for myself.
I thought that you were blooming.
It was gray.
Your skin
Gone
was meadows.
with big bursts of
and the
fire
sun was
inside, but
letting
it
it
hurt,
seep in
so
your
I
pores.
kept you away.
But I was the one who planted it, and
You were
that's where
outside
it
in your
developed.
Subaru waiting to tell me we're through.
No,
I didn't think
you
you
weren't
could
a
do it.
sunflower. You were a volcano. Magma melted
My
atoms
nails were
and
red
ash.
this time. My
Thin
hands
layer
were
of skin
glowing
made your
red,
brain. I
pulsing
should have known that when the rain
red,
came and washed your
dripping
petals away, your
red.
bones would disintegrate like
I
papers in a
couldn't
flame.
ask you for any help. I
Your
had
mouth
to
poured
leave.
lava and steam. You vomited crime and imprisonment, not the sun.
How is it enough? Never enough. Will never be enough.
Your ribs were everywhere. I know I didn't break them. Who did?
He couldn't fix them. So I melted into a puddle of bones and fake eyelashes and red nail polish.
As eruption dripped from your oily eyelids, I saw that your meadows were orange and flowing.
Leave me! Please. I need you to go, or I'll have to.
Those galaxies turned gray as they hit the air, but I still had your petals.
I will never be your sunflower.
I held them. I let them go. I had to. don't like to be lonely like this, wondering why our hands don't have agency. It's so burnt in this room. I pick flowers for vases I don't have, and hide them from the cold in oversized anoraks, unzipping them only to reveal that they've all just died from the heat of your cayenne and boil and lava and nebulas. I need someone to grab my nose and pull it down, unzip my face, my throat, my chest, and reveal the bizarre poppies sprouting out between my bizarre ribs. Wine dripping down the stems into my carnivore caverns. The blaze of ghost meadows hidden by shiny, silky skin. Sometimes, when I'm gone, I rub my hands under hot water until they are red. And I hold them up to the mirror and see the magma and oil and tears mixing. So I punch my reflection until my fingers are wet again. And it's the soak that stains the sink, my sweater, the drain, my toes, the tile, never us. And I lose my voice when my heart beats. Here I am, filling up, filling in, filling out, filling with liquid sunshine and beer and acid and never enough water, and I can't hold it all, and I'll burst. Up, out, in the garden, growing in my toilet, welcoming my sunflowers. And I flush them. The wet pollen falls away. I was submerged like a jellyfish when I saw you across the dance floor. Neon lights blasting around the room like marbles bouncing underwater. Your eyes were seafoam, and that's what took my breath away. Not the suffocating sweat daringly dripping onto my shoulders and feet, not the vodka slushing in my cheeks, but those piercing eyes that sunk into me.
Everyone said I had electricity in my eyes. Everyone stared. I couldn't escape it. Sometimes I wished my eyes really were electric, that I could shoot lightning bolts and burn everyone in sight just so they would stop wrapping their desires around my tan skin. I tried to strike him from across the dance floor, but not necessarily to electrocute him. He He looked like if he had been burned by something but had resurfaced with shining skin. When he approached me, I wondered if he'd taste the sex on the beach that I drank, and I hoped my lips were sweet.
When we kissed, it was gentle, subtle rain on my skin. Only this time it didn't sizzle. It just glistened. Outside, I tried to be alluring as you sipped on free water, placing your hand on the brick wall just above my shoulder. I was locked into your body, but I never felt trapped. When you moved your hand just above my waist, I thought, I am as electric as his fingers.
I noticed the way he walked. Confident and unwavering, like he knew exactly where he was going. He walked on those neon flashes like they were stairs, and suddenly we were floating above the sway and ride of the bodies beneath us.
As my friends and I rode in the Uber on the way back home, I saw you buzz by in your charcoal-colored car. It had rained a bit, and the roads were wet. So why wasn't the char washed off? What volcano had erupted to form such a thick layer of ash? Maybe it was in you, bursting from your gut when you screamed. You didn't seem burnt, but we were snorkeling in city streams. I couldn't think about drowning because I had never been touched like that before.
I saw him as I drove away. A tingle still on my lips, and it was as if I could be both electric and swimming without sizzling.
You took me to buy late night coffee, and the first thing I noticed was the mural of Cafe Terrace at night. The clumsily drawn stools and shapeless figures oozing, tangerine and gold, navy and eggshell strokes.
He stood there in awe, looking at the paint adorning brick. He said that it was his mother's favorite painting. I pictured him there on that terrace. One stroke of paint and he would drip into the sky.
Then there was the bar. Used mugs with leftover foam, shot glasses brimming with rum or tequila or vodka, scattered sea salt, dried lime juice, pennies and nickels and $1 bills for tips. Somebody's forgotten sunglasses, a dirty dish rag, an ovular plate with scrambled eggs, half-empty bottle of ketchup, crumpled up napkins. After the bartender took our order, we sat on 2 large stools with worn red leather seats, standing below a chess table, pretending to be a table.
The stereo was blasting music, but I could still hear him breathing.
Next to us was a raggedy salon chair, edges frayed, yellowing seat cover, fuzz peeking out of cracks. I'm steaming, I thought as I gulped espresso and milk, wondering what European woman had conceptualized such electricity and buzz from the bitter scent of coffee beans roasting. It didn't matter. I forgot about her as soon as you let me sip your drink, because I swore I could taste your tongue on the straw.
Down his neck, caressing his goosebumps and heartbeats with my lips. I began to press harder, more eagerly into his chest. I wanted to mark him. Leave splashes of bruises like pomegranate juice stained on a white shirt. Sucked furiously at his clavicles. That is where skin was the thinnest. I thought the more purple he was, the less he could bleed.
You drove me to the middle of nowhere one night, where ghosts supposedly left handprints on windshields. It was the second time we'd ventured out into the expanse of darkness. The first time, we reclined in your leather seats and counted how many shooting stars we could see, zipping through the sky.
I think I saw 10, and he only 6, because he was a novice stargazer.
This time, we discussed religion, and you said,
I feel like sin.
And I couldn't understand how salvation about the stars could be so slippery. My thoughts were interrupted by the red and blue flashing fireworks from the cop car behind us. But we weren't in trouble. He simply wanted to know why we were driving such luxury on dirt roads.
I wondered if the scent of sex had latched on to my leather seats. It had to have soaked into the threads.
On our way back home, I questioned you about your sin, and you were so angry, so hurt, so bruised. My words were interrupted by a sudden braking for a porcupine crossing the road. I imagined the blood splattering on the rims and the spikes spraying into the tires. And I realized that sin has spikes too.
It was all so wet. I thought he'd slip away, and I'd be left with the ephemeral hint of his skin on my leather.
We kissed after apologizing, and you held me in your arms, allowing the scent of cologne and skin to wash over me, reminding me why I loved your touch. Euphoria.
I still felt the needle pinch of electricity as our lips touched.
If you had spikes, I could live with adoring you from afar, as long as your hands were still soft and still willing to sin with me like lightning does the earth.
I never wanted to be simply enough. I needed to be more.
One rainy Wednesday, you bought me a strip of neon lights that changed colors. I chose red when we kissed, thinking that the heat would sink into our skin when we took our clothes off. Began to tangle our bodies together. First, our legs. Second, our hands and feet. Third, our mouths. And then we were so much more than two people inside of each other.
This wellness was exhilarating. I was always eager to get his clothes off of his body. Every tendon, every hopping vein, every little blonde hair was beautiful.
We became red and sweaty, dripping in saliva and short breaths, until we finished in a flood of scattered moans and closed eyes. We changed the light to yellow because he said it was good to sleep with. I shut my eyes because yellow was like the sun and invasive and made me ache. I had to keep telling myself I'm wet just to make sure that my pores wouldn't burst into flames.
He was going somewhere in this golden globe, which wrapped around his curls like a halo.
You laid your head down next to mine as you scratched my back, digging your nails only deep enough to tingle and send tickles through my spine. I thought I had drifted and the rawest poem poured from your mouth.
You're absolutely perfect.
You didn't know that I had heard you, that your voice had sunk into my skin. After a while, you rolled over and I wrapped my arm around you. I think we could have slept in the pouring rain without waking up. That's how deep we fell.
I knew that he had been burnt before, and he was still trying to wash the char away. I couldn't fathom who could have destroyed someone so terribly. Or maybe it was done beautifully, because he was a poem worth reading. Sometimes it's better to love someone from far away. But I wanted to love him closely, every day and every night.
We always want to draw on foggy windshield. Hearts, love letters, names, finger paintings of sorts. But I decided to keep mine to myself that night that we drove through the city. Instead, I admired the pattering of rain on tint, until I noticed that the streets were flooding. A sinless soothe of oil underground.
He stopped talking, and I knew poetry had begun to rain in his brain just as it fell from the sky, scattering bits of cloud and electricity and wet onto these streets.
I thought to myself, I'm flooding. Your BMW stopped at a red light, and I was cast in the fluorescent glow of sunsets sliced at half before dark. Spewing spinal fluid and blood cells were real stopped. That's before it turned to alien guts. A neon squirt of lime stain on the concrete you drove through. I couldn't think about bloodshed anymore, so I looked at your hands holding leather, and you moved your right hand to place it in my palm.
I could tell he felt uncomfortable in my hands, almost as if I could make a fist and crush his bones. I just wanted to hold him. When his fingers relaxed, he squeezed a little tighter, and that's when I knew that his skin and the organs needed embrace to flow freely.
Her fingers interlocked, and I could feel sharks swimming within us, flaring their gills to breathe within our bodies and gnawing at our bones, until we were nothing more than scuba suits of skin. I couldn't think about hollowness anymore, so I dove into caffeine and was embalmed by raw Sydney and Van Gogh paintings in a 24-hour coffee shop.
That same coffee shop became his favorite. It became a place where the city, the stars, the cars, and hands accumulated into a sea. He couldn't swim, but he loved to let the waves crash into him over and over until he was soaked.
Your eyes tasted like almonds and espresso, not sweet like mine, but deeper and dripping with rarities. And we ended up in a park where the monkey bars, and swings, and slides were glossed in honey. Not blood like in the city, but a sugary coat of sex that your knees felt as you took all of me in your mouth.
The air was freezing and damp. Water droplets dripped off of primary colored playground metal. But the risk tasted sweet. My skin was damp, but my fingers were electric. It felt right, transmitting my lightning into him.
The trail back to the car was cold, and the bottoms of my shoes were sticky, but your hands held mine again, so I bounced just fine. Changed when I got home. Body almost completely covered in warm knit, yet my skin still wet. Everlastingly rain glazed. Unruly hair and shivers after sex, lava lamp glow in kaleidoscopes, the short waft of peppermint and latex. I knew the liver, kidneys, intestines, lungs, heart. I wanted to know the bones. Here's my sternum, rib cage, femur, tibia and fibula, pelvic bone, skull. Can he kiss my hips? The biggest organ in the body is the skin. And his lips tell me that I am so beautiful everywhere. Even my organs, especially my heart. How can he see them all? They're so hard to find behind my skin, too easy to lose within this dusk. Bones, muscle, organs, the deep red of it all. Found the living static in me. This room, it has butterflies painted on its bricks. Molten monarch mortar. Never sunflowers. There are names and places only we know. I call this one Peninsula, only because this is where our fingers graze each other's. He told me that it had rained, and I rushed out because I needed the scent of a soak. But the wet was like unmelted raw sugar at the bottom of a teacup, yet the road still welcomed my feet. As I stood there looking up at two sinewy branches from either side of the street, almost touching, never kissing. And it was only 32 degrees, still winter, so the sky was cedary and strewn and blue. Yet somehow I didn't yearn for the sun. There are names in places only we know. I call this one ours, only because this touch is where the rain begins. I didn't know what history tasted like until I was burned. I stood there. Then, I gave. Now, I swim there. And I know what tomorrow tastes like, because I am soaked.